Hello, everyone. I'm Erik D'Souza, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Crime Writers of Canada's podcast, where we are celebrating Bouchercon by having interviews with the guests of honor. So it is my honor today to introduce Jennifer Hillier. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. So a little bit about you. Jennifer is the Canadian guest of honor at Bouchercon 2026 in Calgary this year. She is a USA Today, Toronto Star, and Globe and Mail best-selling author of The Things We Do in the Dark, describes as intoxicating thrill ride by the New York Times and a propulsive and chilling by the People magazine. It was Indigo's top 10 best book of the year, Amazon editors spotlight pick, and a Goodreads Choice Award nominee. She also is the author of six other novels, including the USA Today best-selling Little Secrets and Jar of Hearts, which won the ITW Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel. She is a Filipino-Canadian and was born in Toronto but spent several years in Seattle before returning home to Canada. She currently lives in Oakville, Ontario with her family. I know it's been a while since you had to talk about the things we do in the dark. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had to give me an elevator pitch, could you still do it?
I'm going to try. I need to have the disclaimer that I'm a terrible elevator pitcher, and I have never successfully sold a book to someone by talking about it myself. But I have to practice and get better. So, Things We Do in the Dark is about she's in her 30s. She's a woman married to who she thought was a retired celebrity comedian, a much, much older man. And they live a quiet life. But then he decides to make a comeback. He decides he wants to have a Netflix-like comedy special, and he's starting to build fame. And then one day he turns up dead. He's discovered dead, bleeding out in a bathtub, and she is standing over him holding what looks like the murder weapon. So as she's being arrested and handcuffed, and there's photographers and paparazzi taking photos of her coming out of her huge house in Seattle, dead husband inside, covered in blood. Her biggest concern is not the current arrest, but a murder she may have been involved in that no one knows about from some 20 years earlier. So, Things We Do in the Dark is about a present day murder and a past secret, which are all my favorite things to write about. And I think all of my books have past secrets and present day murders happening. That is my pitch.
A little long for an elevator pitch, but I'm not going to
All
hold it
right.
against you.
It's supposed to be one sentence. Oh.
That is fine because it also, I mean, it does tell us that it's a complicated storyline. And you maybe even undersold it in the sense of how complicated it is. It's told from multiple points of view, different timelines, different locations. It's going back and forth. It's, I don't know, challenging to the reader, enjoyable, but challenging to the reader. I assume that you're a very organized writer.
Um, I'm not, and I wish I was. I wish I outlined. I wish I knew where the story was going when I started it. I think if I could figure out a process that was more organized, I think I'd be a much more efficient writer, and it wouldn't be 4 years between books. But I am not organized. I surprise myself a lot. And part of me doesn't want to mess with that because I think it's worked so far. But then part of me is like, wow, 8 books in, and you've been lucky 8 times that you finished the book. But I feel like that luck is going to run out if I don't start to be a bit better of a planner. But I love writing and not knowing because when I'm surprised, I feel like the reader will be too. And that's kind of the joy of it for me.
I mentioned multiple locations, and as a Canadian reader, I was very excited that the locations are happening above the border. Most of the story takes place in Vancouver and Toronto. Um, I know you have an American publisher though, and
I do.
that does not go over easily often. I know that's changing. Some publishers are
Mhm.
happy with it.
Yeah.
A lot still are not and refuse and say would have told you to go back to Seattle again. Is that what happened to you, or did you have to fight, or were you embraced for your idea?
Uh, you know, It never came up because the first six books I wrote were exclusively set in Seattle, which is where I was living for most of them. And I was writing about what I saw every day. So it was natural to write about Seattle, or my version of fictional Seattle. But with this one, I was living back in Toronto, and it was the first time that I felt compelled to write scenes set in my hometown. I don't know that I ever really felt inspired by it before because when you know a city so well, it's hard to describe it in a way that I think is exciting to other people. Whereas when I was writing about Seattle as a newbie in Seattle, I was describing it to the reader the way that I was experiencing it for the first time, which was like, oh my God, it really does sort of mizzle every day here, right? The misty drizzle. It is really cloudy most of the time, except for maybe July and August. Those things are true. People really do drink a lot of coffee. People can tell when you're not from the Northwest if you carry an umbrella. I didn't know that an umbrella would out me as someone who is not native to the area because I'm like, why would we not carry an umbrella? People don't carry umbrellas. It's a pain in the ass. They put a hood on and they get going. So there were things that I didn't know, and I was able, I think, to describe that to the reader as a newcomer myself. But Toronto, I'm like, how do I make Toronto exciting? I see it every day. I've lived here my whole life. I don't think it's that exciting. I'm used to it. But coming back home after 8 years in Seattle, I felt like I could describe it. And I didn't think to ask if it would be a problem. I didn't think about it until I handed in the book and said, by the way, I think half of it is set, in Toronto. And it was cool. They were cool with it. And it never came up as an issue. And I was glad for that because I feel very strongly that there are just characters that need to be Canadian. That's just the way that I envision them. And a lot of the experiences of the main character, um, you know, it's Toronto in the 90s, the way that I experienced Toronto in the 90s. It's not glamorous. It's sort of West Toronto, which is called, we call it Etobicoke. If you live here, we call it Etobicoke. But to everyone else, it's part of Toronto. But it's gritty, it's working class, it's extremely multicultural. It's a little bit sketch in some areas, and that's how I experienced it growing up. It's not a fancy Toronto. I felt very strongly it needed to be set there, but no pushback. Um, Nothing that made me feel like I couldn't write about it. And in fact, because I was living in Toronto at the time that the book came out, it actually was an easier pitch, I think, to Canadian retailers. I think it did make a difference in terms of Indigo and how they received the book because it's like, oh, hey, a Canadian author writing a little bit about Canada. I think that this is great. We can promote this in a way that we haven't been able to sort of get excited before. So it worked out well.
I'm glad, and you've also touched on saying that Toronto and Vancouver also is very multicultural, very diverse, and
Very, very much so.
something we don't often see in mystery genre. You used a lot of several races and different
Mhm,
cultures, and
mhm.
they find their way into their story. Did you think it was important to have that diversity in your book?
Um, it's funny. Yes, I think it's extremely important to have characters that represent who we are and how we live and what we see. I have written about racial, like I've written about race, I've written about all of my main characters are women of color from the very, very beginning. That's been the case. It has never been something intentionally done. It's just my experience. I think it would feel um, strange to me to not include characters of different races because that's not my lived experience. Growing up, I grew up in Mississauga, Ontario. Mississauga back in the 80s was actually fairly white. It didn't become multicultural until a little bit later. I went to a school where there weren't a ton of other, non-white kids. Um, and that's so different now. But so I've experienced the feeling of being like othered, and being a person who isn't white and not part of that sort of default. But I've also experienced being completely integrated into a culture that you see everything. And Toronto is not in any way homogenous at all. And to not write about that or to ignore that would be weird because that's how the characters see the world. That's how they move through the world. And if you are a woman of color, you move through the world with that lens. And it does affect how you see things. It does affect how you're treated. It would be really I think, inaccurate to not mention those things. And so it was natural for me to write that into the book, but I wrote it in a way that I hope was just very organic. It just it is. It's not intentional. It's not trying to make a point. It just is.
Yeah, yeah, you do go into her family, immigrant family, and how that's different. So that's
Yeah.
maybe a different story than
The
most.
big Filipino, well, not a big Filipino family, but she's Filipino and her mom is Filipino and she has very Filipino aunts and cousins, and it's a very Filipino experience for sure.
I maybe missed the signs, but I didn't realize Drew was black till about halfway. And I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if that was a mistake on my half. Like, oh,
No, you know what? I saw him as Black from the beginning. He is an amalgamation of many, many different Jamaican friends I've had growing up. And I always saw him that way. It doesn't come up though, in general, until someone else points it out. He's not going to tell you. Like, I mean, he's not going to wake up and go, oh, okay, I'm waking up, I'm dressing my black man self. Like, he's not going to, that's weird. You're not going to know until someone else mentions it, honestly. And I think I don't remember the exact instance of when that is specifically said. It might have been when he is interviewing Ruby in prison, and she says, "Oh, you're the black guy that I heard about." And I think that is the point where the reader for 100% knows, oh my gosh, But there are references, I think, to his like Jamaican background and how he grew up. And again, if it doesn't hit the reader, that's totally fine. I don't think it changes the story. If it does, great. But it just is. It just
yeah,
is. There's no deeper meaning other than this character who is one of the characters, Joey, one of her bestest friends, he's Jamaican. It's basically it.
yeah.
She's Filipino. That's it, you know?
It's amazing, and I'm guilty of this too, even though I have brown skin. I was reading it, and then about halfway through, you mentioned it, and I was like, oh, because that's not where I start from.
Yeah, yeah, but I think we're conditioned to do that, don't you,
Yeah.
though? Like, I feel like we have grown up reading a ton of fiction, obviously, because we're writers, right? And the default setting, honestly, for me, especially growing up reading mystery thrillers written predominantly by white authors, the default setting has been white characters, unless
Yeah.
otherwise specified. The assumption, and I'm guilty of this too, is that we assume they're white. Unless you tell me otherwise, maybe I'll assume that. And that's totally how it is. And I think it's changing now. I think newer readers to the genre won't necessarily maybe have that same conditioning, but I know that I did growing up. All of my favorite writers, John Grisham, Jonathan Kellerman, Jeffrey Deaver, Patricia Cornwell, I mean, they were white writers predominantly writing about, other than Deaver, who writes about Lincoln Rhyme, but I don't think that's unusual, and
Mhm.
it doesn't offend me um, at all. It just, again, I'm writing about what I see, and if I feel the need to tell you, I will. And sometimes you'll be surprised by it because the character is surprised by it when they meet someone, right? And that's kind of how I presented it.
Depending on when people are listening to this, if they're listening to it at Bouchercon at this point, your new book will already be out. If they're listening to it when we're
Yeah,
recording it, we're still a few months away. Heart of Glass, I don't know much about it. I know it's back in Washington State.
yeah, it is, it is, it
What
is.
can you tell us without telling us too much?
So it's a seaside story. So my fourth book, Wonderland, is was inspired kind of by, I mean, you're from the area-ish, so we have every summer this big CNE. It's the Toronto exhibition. It's the Canadian National Exhibition, which is like a big fair. And that fair has been going on for like 100 and something years. And it's something that's a rite of passage if you live here, that you will go to this fair for 2 weeks in August and you'll eat a bunch of crappy food and you'll go on the rickety rides and you'll come home like exhausted and sick, but you had the best time. And it's that combined with the amusement park Wonderland. I see it set in a town called Seaside, which is on the coast of Washington, completely fictional, completely made up, very touristy, but very small town in that they're like outsiders to come and visit, but don't stay too long. So that book I wrote back in 2015. And when I was writing Heart of Glass, I had a hard time like it took me 4 years to write this book, which I it was miserable. I mean, so much of it was like just stressful, and I'm trying to find my way into the story. And nothing unlocked for me until I changed the setting, because the setting originally was urban. It was originally set in Toronto, and it was set in Seattle. And then it didn't feel right. And then I kind of moved the setting and I changed it to seaside. And when I moved it back to that fictional little town of Seaside, everything kind of opened up. I was like, oh, I like this vibe. I like that the town is small. I like that everyone knows everyone and is in each other's business. You know, as growing up in Toronto, I mean, it's such a big city, it's so easy to not know your neighbors. I don't know what it is. It's a big city, but you can feel very lonely in a big city. In a small town, it's almost impossible to feel lonely because everyone is in your face all the time. And everyone knows your mom, and everyone knows your neighbor, and everyone knows your dentist. And it's just different. So, Heart of Glass is set in Seaside, the fictional town of Seaside. Very pretty from the outside, but sinister things happen on the inside. And there's almost this like it's almost like as if the residents there are in denial about how violent their little town actually is. My editor actually sort of said it reminded him of Castle Rock, you know, Stephen King's Castle Rock, where a lot of his stories are set. And I took that as a huge compliment because I don't know that that was what I was going for, but growing up reading a lot of Stephen King, I'm like, oh, I like that. You know, I like that there's this little town where really terrible things happen. So, Heart of Glass, the night before this big grand opening weekend, where Wonderland is set to reopen, closed due to scandal 10 years earlier, a dead body washes up on the shores. And there's a local reporter who works for a dying small town newspaper, is there on the scene, and it reminds her a lot of a murder that happened when she was a teenager, the murder of her best friend. And while all of this is happening, there's also a docu-series that's about to release streaming, um, starring, featuring the serial killer that sort of stalked the West Coast when she was in high school. And he has some bombshells to drop. Namely, one of them is that he didn't kill her best friend, which he said he did, but now he's saying he didn't. So all of these secrets are about to come out, and that's basically Heart of Glass. And again, that was a terrible elevator pitch. But there's a couple different timelines, and one of the characters, Barb, is stuck in Seaside. She never got out, but her other best friend did and became a big reality star. And her life is very different, and she ends up coming back to Seaside, and they have to figure out what the truth is, basically.
I can see why it took you 4 years.
Yeah, well,
I'm no faster than
I
you. So
know.
I'm in no way throwing shade. I'm just as bad.
I laugh about it because I remember when I was struggling with the book, it was a couple of years ago. I had like 200,000 words of this massive monstrosity of several different storylines happening. And if you're a non-writer, then you should know that 200,000 words is an insane amount of words. No book should be that long ever. So my editor was like, "Can you just send me everything you have? Like, send me everything, and I will help you figure this out." And I was mortified because I'm a very private writer. I don't like to send my editor any work until the book is done. Basically, I don't invite opinions in because I will confuse myself. So, but I was lost, and I'm like, okay, fine. I sent him 4 or 5 different drafts. Each one was monstrously long. And I waited a couple months while he sifted through it. And he gets back to me and he says, um, you have like 3 or 4 novels in this book, in this. And I'm like, I know. And he's like, any one of them could work. You just got to pick one. And I'm like, if I could pick one, I'd have picked by now. So after lots of like chit-chatting, I finally dialed it down to the story that I wanted to tell. But a big part of that happened because I picked the setting that was seaside. So that actually made a huge difference, which is not my lived experience. And maybe that was what I needed to try to tap into. All of my lived experiences are really evident in every other book that I've written, but this is the one setting that I don't really have a ton of a relationship with, because I've always grown up in big multicultural cities. So seafood is very different. But yes, it took 4 years, and I don't recommend that.
Oh, sorry. Maybe you have two more novels in there already.
There
Already
could be.
done.
I mean, I don't delete anything. There's probably enough in there for a whole other book. Oh my God. But I never want to look at that stuff again. Like it's done.
Fair enough. As a guest of honor for Bouchercon, have you been to a lot of them?
Well, I've been to four Bouchercons. This will be my fourth actually. So Calgary will be my fourth. The last one I attended before this one was Dallas in 2019. And I haven't been to one since then because I have a kid and he's elementary school aged, and so the timing never worked, unfortunately. But I'm excited to come back. I'm excited to see all of my friends because that's where everyone goes. And I've never been to Calgary, so I'm excited to see Calgary. I can't wait.
That's great. I'm looking forward to going to this event. By then, I hopefully will have read Heart of Glass. I can't wait. And I'll get you to sign it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric.